thank you for joining us for our webinar, Why Optimizing Your Landing Pages Matters. We are thrilled to have you join us for the third webinar in our four-part series, The Lead Conversion Workshop. As the name suggests, the series is designed to help you skyrocket your landing page conversion rates. Be sure to tune into the other sessions to go from understanding the basics to becoming a lead conversion expert. For the best webinar viewing experience, you'll want to adjust the slider that appears to the right of the slide on your screen. We encourage you to submit any questions in the Q&A window in the bottom panel of your screen throughout the webinar. We'll save some time for questions at the end. We'll also send out a recording of today's webinar on Friday. Today's discussion will be hosted by Instapage client partner Ashley Pierce with our special guest, Leah Jack, Growth Marketing Manager at First Leaf. So let's get started. Over to you, Ashley.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kelly. Hi, guys. I'm Ashley. Super excited to be here today. Even more excited to introduce you all to Leah. Leah, thank you so much for joining today. We really appreciate you taking the time. We're excited to hear about your expertise. Let's start with just giving an overview of kind of what your role is at First Leaf and maybe just a summary of First Leaf for the audience, please.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Excited to be here. I work at First Leaf, and First Leaf is all about delivering personalized wines to your door and really making the wine space a little more accessible. It can be intimidating. So First Leaf is all about making sure that if you want wine, we can get it to you. What I do is I work on our direct mail and landing page CRO. So I love testing. I manage around 130 landing pages just for our acquisition team.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again for being here. We're super excited. Before we jump in, sounds like we're going to kick things off with a couple polls. So I'll take the first poll, and then Leah, I'm going to pass it over to you to take the second. All right, audience, here's our first poll. The question is, what is your current level of landing page testing effectiveness? So how would you define yourself? Our options here are I'm a pro, right? I speak this language, I get it. Intermediate, I speak some language, right? But there's still more that I can learn. Or beginner, this is all brand new to me. So we'll take a couple more seconds and see kind of where the audience comes in. We'll see how many pros we have. All right, get your answers in. Okay, so we have a good split here. So we have 7% that said I'm a pro. We have 33 that says middle ground, intermediate, and 60% that says beginner, which we love, guys, because no matter if you came in as a pro, beginner, or anywhere in between, our hope for this webinar is that you leave learning a thing or two that can be applied to everyday life. With that being said, Leah, I'm going to pass it over to you to poll number 2.
All right. It's good to know that there's a lot of beginners in here. Love talking to y'all. So excited to do this. For the next poll, we want to know how often you're optimizing your landing pages. And the choices are you live and breathe it every day. You're like, can't wait to launch another landing page test. Next is fairly often. Then there's once in a blue moon, maybe when you remember to do it, and then never. And I'm hoping that after today, we don't have any more nevers, that you're inspired to tackle this. All right. Okay. Alrighty, I'm hoping to get the neverers up to at least once in a blue moon, hopefully fairly often. And then once in a blue moon, hopefully you have some inspo and some actionable ways of doing some tests. I'm excited to talk to y'all.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thanks, guys, for participating in the polls. This just gives us a really good pulse check as we jump into today's discussion. So Leah, should we jump in? Are you ready?
So ready.
Okay, let's do it. All right, guys. So to start, let's set the stage with an overview of what we're talking about when it comes to landing page CRO. So the question is, what does it mean to optimize your landing pages? So here we have a definition. Landing page optimization really is the process of continually enhancing and improving page performance, right? When it comes to increasing conversions. And really, it's leveraging data-driven insights, right, to go off of versus just unreliable evidence or assumptions. And one thing to note here, guys, is that it's always never ending, right? So it's an ongoing, always on type of strategy, really in terms of maximizing and improving your campaign performance. And don't let that intimidate you. I promise experimenting with landing pages actually can be a lot of fun, as nerdy CRO as that sounds. All right, so now that we've covered what the heck we're talking about when we say landing page optimization, we've also established, right, that it's an ongoing process. We want to talk about some best practices that you can follow and give yourself really a good starting point, as well as some real life examples from Leah that goes along with our best practices. So let's dig in with our first best practice. The first one we're going to talk about today, guys, is making your CTA clear. And now what does this mean? It means being extremely, extremely clear on your offer language, right? I always think it's best to think, what is the consumer's end goal, right? Not your end goal, as tempting as that can be. What is your consumer's end goal? And then turning that into a headline. So a bonus tip here, for landing pages to perform well, there always has to make sure that we are offering to the right audience, right? So here's some examples to make sure that you really are providing that value. You want to ask yourself, is this appealing? So make sure that your target audience wants what you're offering, right? That you're making it appealing to them. Another thing that's crucial, guys, is to figure out where the user is in the marketing funnel, right? Are they coming in later in the funnel, and really catering your page around that. One call out about CTA is it's ever changing, right? If your CTA doesn't fill the needs of your clients, you might have to go back to the drawing board and try again, or maybe again. So Leah, I think this is a good time to pass it off to you for some examples.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I am somebody who really loves seeing examples. I joke I'm a visual learner, which I think we all are, but I like to give concrete examples. So as we go through this, Ashley will go over the principle, and then I will show you specific examples with the control on the left in pink and the test variant in gray on the right. So as you can see in this example, the boxes on the left go discount of $40 off. Then we talk about 60% off retail. Then we reiterate the $40 off, but never do we actually articulate what the price is, right? And so on the right, what we did is we said, okay, the intro box offer is 6 wines for $39.95. Your satisfaction is guaranteed. And then we explain a little more concretely below that, hey, when you discover new wines, you're going to be getting quality wines for 60% off. Very easy switch, but really kind of streamlines the experience for the consumer, because these are acquisition pages. So we really want that person to sign up right now. We don't want them to think about it anymore. We want them just to feel inspired to buy wine.
Wonderful. All right, we are good to move on to best practice number 2, and that is be consistent in your ad to landing page journey. At Instapage, we always say your landing page should be an extension of your ad, right? Really creating that ad to page relevancy. And what does this mean? So this means if you talk about a specific offer in your ad, make sure you're pulling that through to the landing page. If you're talking about a specific product, pulling that through. It's really earning trust with your user, right? That they're seeing an ad and feeling confident that's the same brand as they click on the landing page. Leah, you want to give some examples to this best practice?
Absolutely. Okay, so this one, what I really love about thinking about your ad to page journey is it's probably one of the most attainable things that I think organizations as a whole, we can forget about. And that's because sometimes we forget that our friends and other departments are all integral to the whole experience for the consumer. So in this scenario, there was a couple things that kind of a hunch on, hey, this is, especially because I joined First Leaf during COVID, and First Leaf does not have a storefront. So, even as a new employee, I was kind of like, what is in this box, And if on the left, on the pink landing page, you don't see the product, right? That little triangle on the right is actually part of like a stock image of one of the wines, but you can't see it. And so the first thing was to make sure that if all of our creative, let's say indirect mail on social, everywhere else shows the box of wines, we want to make sure that people see that on the landing page so that they have that sense of trust and reassurance that they're on the right page. The second thing is that the message personalized wine up to 60% off retail is not the only message out there. And in fact, wasn't the top performing message. So we went ahead and made sure that the whole flow made sense. A lot of times, like if you think about your own experience, when you see an ad, you kind of often you want to see the messaging repeated on the landing page to make sure that you're in the right place. So that's something that we did here as well, and saw that, also I used user testing in the background before this. User testing meaning that we asked some new people to the product, hey, what do you see? And they were like, I love that I can see the box. I want to know what's inside, since I won't be able to evaluate it until it's literally on my doorstep otherwise.
Awesome. Thanks, Leah, for those examples. Moving on to number 3, guys. This one seems so simple, but can be really challenging. Number 3 is make your page clear and concise. So what does this mean? Really, it means making it as easy as possible for your audience to convert, right? So what are some ways you can do this? I always start with bigger paragraphs, right? Going to paragraphs and figuring out how you can simplify and shorten the copy, right? Make it strategic so that you're pulling out the main bulleted pieces, right? But we know as a consumer, you don't get a ton of time to grab their attention. So how do you grab their attention and grab it fast? Another thing we do here is in processes, can you create illustrations, right? Versus a lot of words, and make it visually appealing for the consumer to get what they need in a quick amount of time. Really, guys, what this means is being really strategic on your page, right? And making it as simple as possible for the user to convert. Leah, I know you have some great examples here, so I'm going to pass it back to you.
Absolutely. Okay, so on this, so obviously same pages, but looking at it from the lens of make your page clear and concise, I'm also going to give you a couple tips on components of Instapage that really helped us scale this particular insight. So on the left, there's that glorious pink background with only a tiny segment of a wine bottle. A lot of it is actually hiding behind the white box where you see, do you prefer red, white, or mix, the limited time offer. And then you can see our name, First Leaf, and then the copy. All of that sits on top of the background image and is all one block. And the problem with that is that if I wanted to make a change or personalize at a channel level or at a URL level, I'd have to go in individually and make changes. That was really, really time consuming. So I made sure to go to our design friends and say, I really want to simplify this. I want to make sure that we can show the product, like I mentioned, so that people understand what they're getting. And let's like really focus in on why we want them to sign up, but what would also be inspiration to stay with us, because we are a subscription. And so what we did is we got rid of the white box. We moved the 3 CTA buttons up, and we got more specific about what we want to say. And a couple ideas here on how to leverage Instapage, again, like blocks. If you've heard of it, there's my blocks and global blocks. Global blocks is if you kind of make a section of your website and then you want to use that over and over again. But the key is that if you make a change to the primary, it changes it across all the landing pages. What was really helpful here is that we moved the First Leaf logo into its own little global block. So that way I can change it really easily if we need to. And then the second thing is this overall template with the copy aligned on the left and the box of wines on the right makes it really easy to see the product, read the information, and then there's one CTA button.
Awesome, thank you. So that leaves us with number 4, which is be intentional with your layout. So what we do before we even start the brief process, right, is really define if our audience is coming in from a mobile focus or a desktop focus, right? That helps shape kind of how we set up the page and the page layout. Another thing is always keep in mind, again, you get the consumer for a quick amount of time. So making sure that all that important and valuable information is above the fold, right? So making sure assets are clear and, copy, like we talked about earlier, is strategic, brand colors and themes. And I know this seems so obvious, but really take a step back and do a page check. Do it from the consumer standpoint, right? Like look at it from your phone, look at it from your desktop, and just make sure that colors look right and that as a consumer that the flow makes sense. Really put yourself in the lens of the consumer and look at that page to make sure that it makes sense. Leah, I know you have some great examples here, and I know you also, this is one that you use often. So I will hand it over to you to chat more about.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes it can feel like some of these best practices overlap, and that's because they do. Ideally, you're looking at things holistically and you're really considering your test ideas, your hypotheses, your hunches, your direct feedback, and looking at it from, like Ashley said, both from a desktop and a mobile perspective. And so what I would call out here is, again, making sure that the branding is clear, that it doesn't kind of disappear into the rest of the page, that we really accentuated the box and made sure that the alignment, even on the landing page, makes sure that you can see the box with the bottles. I also want to just call out that while we went from 3 buttons to 1, that was intentional so that we could have the space to have the 2 elements sit kind of opposite each other. So alignment can make a big difference in how you look at your information. And I cannot say enough that this is also a collaborative effort with the design team. While Instapage does have some ready-made global blocks that I've absolutely used, when you're thinking about it again from a branding perspective, you might have slight tweaks to it that you just want to make sure kind of have the same look and feel as other creative assets or even other landing pages that you use.
Awesome. All right, moving on to number 5. Number 5 is create a sense of urgency when this applies, right? So we ran into a lot of pages like this for Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And really it's, language around limited time or, X amount of products or act fast. It can even be a pre-launch, right? Getting users excited about a product that's coming. You can even experiment with countdowns, right? To see if that makes sense. But all in all, you're really creating this feeling of something that's going fast or it's limited. And in return, it helps, improve your page performance and helps consumers not only convert, right, but convert in a quicker fashion. Leah, I know this applies to you guys, so I'm going to hand it back over to you for some examples.
Yeah, and this example, you might say, hey, wait a second, on the left, you say limited time offer, and on the right, you don't. I have a few reasons for that. And this is another example of taking a step back and thinking about your consumer and the wider space that you sit within. So first things first, our consumers love knowing that we are giving them personalized wine. So by changing the copy on the CTA button to say, take a quiz to learn your tastes, we're actually leaning into something they already want. The second thing is we do run promotions fairly often throughout the year. And so having the flexibility of copy to really be able to amp up the promotional language was something we wanted. So we keep the evergreen language a little less time sensitive, a little more thinking about your experience. What are you getting from being in this club? What is exciting about personalization? And then use the promotional periods to talk more about pricing and kind of the limited time offer. Another thing is Ashley mentioned, like, think about your consumer and what are you trying to answer for them? One thing I'll call out is that we amped up the language around satisfaction guaranteed. And that is another way of kind of meeting them where they are and ensuring that there's less friction as we bring them through the onboarding process.
Awesome. Thank you. So that brings us, guys, to our final best practice, and really one of our main focuses for today. So this probably won't surprise you, but number 6 is experiment, experiment, experiment. Leah, I'm going to pass this one over to you to speak to this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing with landing page testing is you really, you can go forever, right? So how do you think about where, in something like this, we're like, oh my gosh, but the gray version won, what else can I do? You pop it into mobile and then you double check whether the same things that you believe drove your lift in desktop actually drove the lift in mobile. Here's an example where we realize that actually you can't see the box when it's in mobile. And this is another tip for using Instapage to the best of your ability is going from desktop to mobile. You have to use the same elements that you upload into desktop on mobile. However, in the mobile view, you can actually hide certain elements. And then there's an option to add a background image for mobile only. And so what I do is I ask our creative team to essentially give me an image that is sized to mobile. And that way I can make sure that on the desktop version, the box is aligned kind of center right. And in mobile, it's a little more centered, but then we move the copy around a little bit to make sure that it flows as smoothly. So it's great that we can have that variant in mobile, but also like, don't ignore it because it's super important. You want to make sure that you know how much of your traffic is actually coming from mobile. It's easy to forget, particularly because we work on desktop, that a lot of your consumers might be coming through the mobile experience. So you want to make sure that both views look solid. And if you realize after the fact that your mobile experience can use a little zhuzhing, that's okay. Zhuzh away and do another experiment.
Perfect. Well, that last best practice of experimenting brings us to a nice transition into our next topic, which will be when and what to test. So let's hop into the second part of the webinar. When and what to test. So as marketers, guys, we love to be able to say for certain that we know what's going to resonate with our audience, right? And as tempting as it can be to just assume we know, and can predict how users are going to engage. This is just something that we always do, right? But that's why it's so important that we test. So that leads us to another quick poll. So we'll pull up our next poll, and that is, what is your favorite thing to test? Leah, I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite thing to test?
I love imagery. I am just about finished with my master's in psychology. And so I love to think about how someone feels in the moment of using whatever product, or whatever company I'm working for. And so for wine, I like to think about, does someone like to see another person drinking the wine, unpacking it? Do they like to be with friends? Are they outside at a picnic? Are they inside? Like, I love all of that. And it's so easy to do because a lot of times your creative team has a ton of imagery that you can play with. So it's not a big lift.
Love it. Well, let's see how the audience replied. Okay, so majority agreed with you, Leah. So we have 41% that says imagery, and then a pretty good split between CTA and header language. All right, well, thanks, guys. So Leah, this begs the question, how and what do we know to test? So I'm going to let you kind of jump into where we should start with this.
Okay, so spoiler alert, there is no wrong answer to this. There's also, I think Ashley talked about this earlier, which is take a step back and think about what you're trying to solve for your consumer. And when you take a step back, where do you think that you are meeting that need? And where do you think you might be falling short? Remember that people have like 1 second attention span, right? Before we're like, we got to go back to TikTok. I got to watch a vid. So if that's the case, if you have 1 second to make an impression on them, what stands out to you as the biggest opportunity? And again, it's okay if you're wrong. That's the whole point of experimentation, is if you're wrong, okay, that's not the one we need to focus on. Let's try another priority. I think that when you're in a pinch, show your landing page to somebody else. Show, like, to a friend, to your mom, to your cat. No, not your cat, but show it to anybody and think about, what do they react to? Do they say something doesn't make sense? If you get defensive, definitely test that part, because that means that you might be overcompensating for something. As somebody who works at the brand, it's very easy for us to do that because we know the product inside and out. We know how much our engineers and R&D are working on the product. Sometimes we can overcompensate. So putting in fresh eyes on the landing page can really help you identify, where am I maybe a little bit biased? Like, where can I maybe challenge myself on what someone new might be thinking about this? And so there's 4 bullets on the screen that I'm going to go through. One is headlines and copy. I challenge you, count the words on your landing page, cut it in half, try again. Because think about writers of books, right? Like, you have your first draft and then you have your final draft, and the final draft is going to look really different than the first draft. I would argue that what helps when you cut your number of words in half is that you are forced to really make the point. And so that can really help you start off with testing, just fewer words, more to the point. What happens? Second is imagery and design. So this can get, there's a lot of ways you can take this. You can start by just checking, do the colors match the branding palette, right? Does that work? If not, you have some immediate opportunities. You can change the background color, the CTA button, and move images around. Again, when you think about mobile, does your consumer see just a paragraph of copy before they even see an image of the product? Or do you have the image or the product image higher up? Like, these are all immediate changes that you can make that can really show you whether or not you're leaning into what someone actually wants to see. CTA text and buttons. So thinking about how often you put a button on the page. I prefer fewer. There was a time in my career where more buttons was better, but I think less is more because it's a little less desperate, but also you're giving somebody the opportunity to digest the information. And honestly, if you have to put buttons that many times, then maybe you're not hitting the mark. So if you have one button that really calls out to them, is in a bright color, and they go towards that, great. What else can you put around it that might help them feel more confident? And that leads me to social proof. So thinking about, again, in a digital world where maybe not everybody can touch, see, or feel your product, how can you make them feel more confident about their decisions? And that is social proof. So that also gives you some options. Do you want to use user-generated content? So like reviews that you have directly from your consumers? Do you want to look at third-party sites like Trustpilot and get a badge? What are some opportunities for you to highlight the quality of your product as verified by other parties, and think about where that can be on the page? I would say that for us, at First Leaf, the featured in brand logos make a big difference, but also where on the page that sits is really important.
Awesome. Great elements, Leah, in all things that we spend quite a bit of time on at Instapage as we, start the landing page process. So thank you for sharing. Now comes the fun part. We're going to take all that we learned and pull it together in some real life examples that Leah's going to take us through. Leah, I'm going to pass it back over to you.
Cool beans. Okay. So here we have, there's a lot of information, lots of stars. I'm going to walk you through it. So on the left, and I would say this test is what we would call like a big swing. And you have your control desktop view on the left, and below that, the variant. And then with the fun stars is where I made some changes. So first, we updated the copy to accentuate more about the club rather than just the price point, and also thought about what messages we see do well in creative and mimicked that language on the landing page. The second thing is we moved the CTA buttons out of that bottom bar and moved them into kind of that top hero space so that we had room to show the logos that I mentioned previously. Logos, also super cool. And then the image. So I mentioned that I like to think about a lot, like, why does someone like a certain type of image over another? We're all on the top in the control. I kind of felt like, although that is literally my favorite brand that we have, whose hand is that? Why is this person there? Where am I? And so on the bottom one, it was really about saying, okay, here's our box. You can see our branding. You can see this person enjoying that same bottle of wine. And she's feeling it, right? We want people to see that. We want people to feel engaged and excited and visualize their experience as they start onboarding. But then in the mobile view, also had some opportunities. So in the control versus the variant, again, moved up the kind of the zhuzhed up headline, moved up the image so that right away it's engaging. And in this scenario, yes, we actually did allow the logos to get pushed down a little bit, but we did that in favor of larger copy at the very top. It kind of felt like in the control, it was just like super small. And I was worried that in different size phones, it would just look a little strange. So we made the copy size more consistent, which again, did push down the logos, but we felt like that was the right move. Overall, these changes drove a 27% lift in conversion rate. So it was a success. We were super excited about it. And this was just one more step in our landing page journey. And then this one I love because one thing is, like, I swear I never understand at the end of the day why tiny changes can make such huge impacts to conversion rate, but it happens, which is why you never want to discount ideas just for like the size of the idea. Sometimes you're going to be surprised. So in this scenario, we used the heat map functionality that Instapage has. Pro tip, if you're doing a lot of testing on a landing page, the heat map may not be as useful because you constantly are renewing the data that goes to that page. But this page had actually been untouched for a little while. So I checked the heat map and found that there was a lot of energy around what we lovingly call the bubbles. And so I thought, oh, you know what? We don't have those linked. I wonder if people think that by kind of breaking it out into those bubbles, they have to click on those to get the deal. And so we literally just hyperlinked to those bubbles, ran a test where the only difference was hyperlinking those bubbles. And we saw a 37% lift in conversion rate. So that's an example of really just leaning into how people think about the page, or what we are setting them up to expect, and then leveraging that for not only their benefit, but ours, because we were just reducing tension. We're making sure that they didn't feel frustrated that the buttons, quote unquote, didn't work, and instead made it easy for them to start onboarding.
Super cool. Thanks, Leah, for sharing these examples. It's always helpful to kind of see what you did in real life. So before we jump into Q&A, guys, let's do a quick recap of what we've covered. So first, we started with some best practices, right? So here, the 6 that we talked about today, the first one was making your CTA super, super clear. Right? Number 2 was being consistent in your add to page journey. So making sure that add to page relevancy is there. Number 3, making your page clear and concise, right? Being very strategic about the copy on your page. Number 4, being intentional with your page layout. So really looking at the page in the eyes of a consumer, right? And making sure that it all makes sense. And number 5 was creating a sense of urgency, right? When this applies, creating that limited time feel. And number 6 was experiment, experiment, experiment. Moving on to the second part, we talked about why testing is so valuable for marketers. And kind of a recap here is honestly, testing is the only way that you're going to know what works. You're going to know what doesn't work for your marketing campaigns. And even if you think your campaigns are performing well to your standards, right, there's always room to continually optimize. So I know that was a lot in a short amount of time. But Leah, I'm going to ask if there's any final words of wisdom or advice you want to leave with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So first things first, don't forget about mobile. I know that like since I started my professional career, I've heard that this is the year of mobile, but just bear in mind that everybody's on their phone. And so if you look at your site traffic, if you don't know where to start on testing, my number one thought is check your performance at a device level. You're very likely to see that your mobile performance is not as strong as your desktop performance. There you go. You've already got a space to start testing and literally just start moving around elements, if nothing else, to see what happens. Second is, as I mentioned, count the number of words on your page, cut them in half, see what happens. The third one is that you don't have to overcomplicate it. Don't get crazy. Just think of one thing at a time. And if you need to, make yourself a list, try to prioritize, but all else fails, just start testing. And the last one is remember your friends. You're friends with your creative team. You're friends with your retention team. You're friends with all groups in your company. So leverage their expertise and leverage their insight into how you can cultivate the best experience for your prospective consumers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leah. We really appreciate all that advice. Before I turn it back to Kelly for Q&A, I would like to remind everyone this is our third of 4-part workshop. So it sounds like there will be another one upcoming. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Also, thanks guys for attending. We really appreciate it. Sounds like there is a special Instapage promo that's going to come with a follow-up email. So also keep your eyes open for that as well. And again, just thank you all for your time today. Kelly, I'm going to pass it back over to you for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley and Leah. That was super engaging. I love seeing all those real life examples and having Leah really walk through all of those best practices that Ashley, you described. So we have a few minutes for Q&A and we've gotten some great questions so far. So I am going to start kind of quizzing you guys. So this first one is for Ashley. So the viewer said, great information. Much of this is D2C, but can be applied for testing and B2B experiences. Does Instapage have any specific tips for B2B landing page optimization?
Yeah, happy to take this, Kelly. So guys, I guess my input would be whether it's B2B, whoever you're targeting, right? You have to always start with kind of what we talked about here is who is your target audience, right? So that starts from looking at, is it mobile focus? Is it desktop focus, right? And really narrowing that down to figuring out what the goal is of the audience, right? Like what is your user end goal? Once you figure that out, right, you turn it into a hypothesis, and that's what your page is going to be based around. And I would argue that all the tips that we just went over here can absolutely be applied to B2B, right? It's still making sure that everything is strategic and that it's clear and concise, that the layout makes sense, always going back to who that audience is, what that goal is, what your hypothesis is. And then really you can run through those best practices, to make sure that page makes sense, but always going back to who that target audience and making sure that it's relevant, for them to convert.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. All right, Leah, this one's for you. How would designing a landing page, for example, therapeutic services, where you don't really promote price-related offers, but more personal benefits, be different from a landing page for a physical product?
Yeah, great question. So first, I also wanted to add one more thought to the B2B. Yeah. Remember that the business is not necessarily doing the Googling or the reading of the landing page. It's a human being. So think about who typically is the one looking at the information. And so that actually dovetails with the therapeutic services. So that's absolutely fine. If you don't want to prioritize price-related offers, what are the value props? What are the benefits that people talk about? If you don't know which ones to prioritize, I say go to your reviews and check what people talk about that they love the most. and go in and then think about the top things that people love about my service listed on the landing page. Yes, no. If no, how can I adjust the copy to reflect that? And if yes, do I make it easy enough to understand? Then you can go back to like cut the words in half and see if that works. Is it in the right place on the landing page? Is it high up in the hero? Or are there any images that would help somebody understand more about the product so you don't have to literally explain it? So for example, with the box of wine, one of the iterations is to actually show the tasting card. So we don't have to actually like call it out all the time. So you show the box, you show the 6 bottles of wine, and you show the tasting cards rather than having to like bullet point it out. So you can leverage a little bit of diversity in your assets, but I would say ultimately, back to what Ashley says too, like, what are you solving for? And is that the number one thing that you're showing on the page?
Awesome. All right, this is another one for you, Leah. Regarding page layouts, are there rules of thumb as to 1, the proportion of blank space to visuals and copy on the landing page, and 2, minimum font size? Oh, and a 3rd, the formula for creating a web page URL.
Okay. Minimum font is what I'll start with. I try not to have anything below 18. I just think that everything below that is teeny tiny. Formula for creating a web page URL. I think that it's really about how you organize yourself. So we use a lot of vanity URLs at First Leaf. So for me, naming the pages is really about how can I best organize my thoughts around what template is this using, or what channel does this ladder up to, or what price point. So it's kind of think about it from that, like, help yourself by what are you organizing. And then if you're not using vanity URLs, then I would say, just make it really simple. Intro, order, landing page, like kind of go from there, because I think it can be a little intimidating if you have, like, let's say alphanumeric codes, like people are going to get a little bit like, what is this? And then in terms of rules of thumb, as a non-designer, my answer is 1, talk to your design team. 2, I would say 20% text, 80% image to start with, and then play around from there. I think then, sorry, I just remembered. The other thing is look at your competitor pages. What are they using? Because those might also set the expectations for the category. So if in the wine space, I will absolutely look at Wink and Naked Wine and see what they have on the page and kind of see, okay, like, because that also tells me what else people look for in the category. And that can be very useful for forming hypotheses, thinking about design elements, or distinguishing your page from them.
Awesome. All right, we've got a couple more minutes here. I want to try to get through at least one more. Maybe we can get a couple more. All right, Ashley, this is a 2-part, so I'm just going to start with the first one. You've mentioned making the landing page appealing. In a case where we have various audiences that don't overlap, what are typically quick adjustments we can make for each in order to get the best results?
Yeah, guys. So in that case, I mean, there's a couple routes, right? Sometimes what we'll do is we will do like a V1 and a V2, right? So V1, we call out kind of what that audience looks like versus V2, right? And do testing. Or sometimes you line them up together and just see the differences. So that happens often, right? Where you could have conflicting audiences or various audience, or maybe you don't even know what the audience is. So that's why, different version testing gives you really data, right? To confirm kind of who that audience is and how they perform. I hope that answered that question.
All right, and then part 2, should we use the same visuals on the landing pages as we did on the ads to keep the ad to page journey consistent?
That's a great question. And I would say that's something to test. Normally, when I start the brief process, I will pull up all the ads, whether it's, let's say it's a search word for breathe, right? I'll pull up all of our ads that show breathe. And I will try to pull that as close to our landing page as possible. So the answer is yes. If possible, I love to be able to test that, but then sometimes it's testing different elements, right? Sometimes it's taking the copy versus the image and pulling that through. So I don't think that's always the answer, but it's a great start, right? Is pulling that through and then testing within, whether it's the image or the copy, within that. But always, 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 yes, looking at that ad and making sure it's as relevant as possible, whether it's copy or images.
Okay, we are at time, but I have to ask this last question because I knew this was going to come up, and I think it would be great for Leah to answer. How long should you keep a test going to ensure you're getting enough data on the results?
Great question. And I think there's kind of two ways to answer this question. One is, what level of risk are you comfortable with, right? So are you like, we need directional information no matter what? Okay, like let's say that you're in a company that has a lot of promotions, which means that for me, or what we find is people during promotions behave very differently than evergreen. Well, if you have a time limit, do your best in that time. I would say though that generally speaking, there are tools that you can plug in numbers to measure stat sig and figure out whether or not the test is at stat sig or if you need a little bit more time. It's a little bit of an imperfect science because it's just like if you have a ton of traffic off of one day, I would not trust that. I would say that either you want kind of a purchase cycle, or for me, it's like 2 weeks because it's twice through the week. People behave differently every day of the week. So I want to make sure to capture that behavior twice, dependent on the amount of traffic. If it's not a lot of traffic, I'll add another week. But I usually, my message internally to the team is we're going to run any test for at least 2 weeks, unless it's a promotion, at which point we're going to just go for the length of the promotion and understand that it's a directional insight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. We've gotten through some really good questions, really great discussion. Thank you again for joining us online. And thank you so much, Leah and Ashley, for the amazing discussion. If we didn't get to your question, we'll be sure to connect with you via email, and a recording of the webinar will be sent out by the end of the week. We'll also share a copy of our ebook, 53 Tips for Conversion-Focused Landing Pages, because clearly there's a lot you can do to improve your landing page performance. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Thanks, guys.